Psalm 75:8. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup, and the wine is red. It is fully mixed, and he pours it out. Surely its dregs shall all the wicked of the earth drain and drink down. Last week we saw that Jesus, during the middle of that week sometime, he decided to go after the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders of the law. He rebuked them openly and in public. It gave all of the people a chance to actually see and think about those scribes and those religious leaders. They weren't happy at all. They were ready to try and kill him, but they knew that they couldn't do it right now because, boy, he just had the backing of the people. So they were trying to find a way to take him out and kill him. And that's where we're going to pick up today. Luke 22, verses 1 through 6. Now the feast of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. The chief priests and the scribes were seeking how they might put him to death, for they were afraid of the people. And Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. And he went away and discussed with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. They were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began seeking a good opportunity to betray him to them apart from the crowd. This is a significant time, the Passover, because you've got people during this week from all around. I'm talking all of Israel, surrounding lands and nations. I mean, there's just a ton of people. And a majority of them have already heard about the Messiah and Jesus. They heard of all his teachings and all his miracles and such. And this is the time that everybody looks for that Messiah to come into town. Because it was the first major feast, and people had heard about Jesus from Galilee. They were in Jerusalem at the time, and they were really hoping to meet him and listen to his preaching. And I mean, he was just a fantastic speaker. They generally had respect and great expectation about him. After all, maybe, just maybe, this is the Messiah that's been promised from so long. Well, the scribes and Pharisees, they were not afraid of God, though. They were more afraid of the people where it came to Jesus. Satan prompted Judas to do what he needed to do. But you know, you can't really hold Judas to a fault by himself. And really what it came down to is motives and greed. When you think about it, when Jesus came and he was telling people and answering them, and he was very plain and open about it, when all the stuff people were asking him, are you the Messiah? I have done everything I can to show you miracles, parables, my good acts. I've healed blind, I've healed the deaf, I've healed the lame, I've raised the dead. Everything points to who I am and who I claim to be. But in Judas's mind, this is not the Messiah he wanted. He wanted to have that all-powerful earthly ruler. And he was thinking to himself, well, maybe since I don't get what I want, I'm going to lash out a little bit. And he may have done it out of spite. Matthew 26, verses 14 and 15. Then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me to betray him to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. Now this points to the motivation of greed. Because if I remember correctly, Judas was the money keeper. And he was pilfering from it all the time. He's the one that got so upset when Mary poured the oil all over Jesus' head and anointed his feet and body. And he goes, we could have taken this and given it to the poor. And Jesus told him, the poor you'll always have. Me you won't. So this is the opportunity for Satan to step in and say, Judas, betray him. Go get some money. Now why would Satan do this? After all, Satan knows the Bible as well as we do, if not better, and he knows that this could be the end of it. He knows what's going to be coming, and yet he does it. Maybe he did it because he was believing his own lies, that he could be victorious over Jesus. It's quite possible that he knew what was going to be taking place and coming, and decided, you know what? If I'm going to have to suffer the way that I understand what it says in the Scriptures, I'm going to make him suffer just as much, if not worse. Satan is that great deceiver. And he really believed that he could be victorious over God and Christ. Habakkuk 2:3, for the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it. For it will certainly come, it will not delay. God could use the wicked works of Judas to further his eternal plan. This was the appointed time for Jesus to save the world, to offer that ultimate sacrifice. And he was preparing for it. They went upstairs to that room, Jesus and all 12, and they were going into that last meal together. Think about this Passover that they were celebrating. Originally, the Passover was to celebrate the freedom and relief from the slaves of Egypt. They were able to come out and do this. They were now a united country of Israel. This Passover, Jesus does something different. He also creates an individual group of people, those united in Jesus Christ, remembering and trusting in his sacrifice. Luke 22, verses 19 and 20. And when he had taken some bread and given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body which was given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And in the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, this cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. Now, we're not told whether or not during this feast, this final meal that they were having, if they actually celebrated the traditional Passover meal and then this followed. We're not told that Jesus did the traditional thing of holding up every bit of food, each and every individual cup of wine that goes with that feast, and describe the meaning behind it. What we are told is when he did this covenant now, he has given instructions on what each of the two things represent. And he does the one thing that no man can do. He tells them, this is now a new covenant. Only God can create covenants with man. Only God can. Think of all the other covenants. The covenant that God had with Abraham when he walked through the ditch after his animals were separated. The covenant that God made with David. The covenant that God has made with a handful of others, coming all the way up through the Old Testament. But here we are. Now Jesus is saying, this is the new covenant for all of you. You're to do all these things in remembrance of me. He has the authority to establish a new covenant sealed with blood, even as the old covenant was sealed with blood in Exodus 24:8. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. This new covenant that Jesus is giving them during the final Passover meal has an inner transformation that cleanses us from all sin, according to Jeremiah 31:34b. For I will forgive their iniquity and their sin, I will remember no more. This transformation puts God's word and will in us, as it states in Jeremiah 31, verse 33b. I will put my law within them and on their hearts. And this covenant is all about a new close relationship with God, as described in Jeremiah 31, verse 34c. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. We can say that the blood of Jesus made the new covenant possible. And it's also made that it is sure and reliable because it's confirmed with the life of God himself. And like many a family after a dinner, a Thanksgiving dinner, or what have you, they all start to talk. And they're having a conversation and they're discussing all kinds of things like, who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to be able to do this? Who's going to be able to do that? And Jesus tells them, I'm going to be going away. And it's a place that you cannot come right away. Well, this was not what Simon Peter wanted to hear. John 13, verses 36 through 38. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered, where I go, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow later. And Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you right now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, a rooster will not crow until you deny me 3 times. Peter knew he was a disciple of Jesus, and no matter where Jesus was going to go, it's a disciple's job to follow. It's a disciple's job to understand and listen and just learn what he can from the teacher. Peter felt so committed in his discipleship that there was no way that he was going to let Jesus get away from him. And yet, what happens? I will lay down my life for you. What he doesn't know is Satan is asking for permission to take him and tear him apart the way that he needs. But Jesus sees and knows what's going on, the spiritual warfare that's taking place behind the scenes. He would have died for Jesus right then and there. I believe Peter, if he said it. Of course, we know the story already, and we understand it. He would have died for Jesus right then and there. But later on, we know he's going to deny him just as Jesus predicted. He made this statement on emotion alone. And soon, when the emotion and when the crisis comes, the emotion's no longer there. Luke 22, verses 31 and 32. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. See, he hears Jesus say, you're going to turn. And when you return, strengthen your brothers. Peter was no doubt ignorant of the fact that Satan has asked for him. Sort of like Job. When God told Satan, have you considered my servant Job? You can do whatever you want to him, but you can't kill him. It's the same situation here. He's going after Peter. Apparently, Satan wanted to do much more to Peter, but the Lord wouldn't allow it. Satan could not do whatever he wanted against him. He had to ask God for permission to even tempt him, to even tear him up a little bit. Satan did not completely crush Peter, though. But that had nothing to do with Peter himself, though. Think about it. It was because Jesus prayed for Peter. Jesus prays for us. When we sit there and think about that, that really should lift our spirits at all times, no matter what we're facing. Christ is our intercessor, and he's protecting us from Satan. Hebrews 7:25. Therefore, he is able also to save forever those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. To fully understand what Jesus prays and prayed for them at that time, and still, I think, it intercedes for us in this manner, we would need to look at the prayer Jesus prayed in John 17. Look at it sometime. Really look at what he prayed. That alone should uplift anybody who is down and feeling a little depressed because life is just crushing on them. Surely there are many times that we would have perished, but Jesus prayed for us and protected us. Peter's faith is going to falter, but it's not going to fail. Jesus did not see a temporary lapse that was to come as a failure of faith. What he is seeing is that Peter would return to him. Now, I don't know how many of us have faltered in our faith. Did Jesus give up on us? No, he looks past that because he knows we're going to return to him. In the Christian life, we may falter, but we must never fail. If we have denied Jesus in some way, in any way, shape, form, or manner, then we must return to him immediately. He goes through. And Jesus is taken. And he's going to deny him. But before we get there, Jesus goes to the garden and he's going to pray. He's going to be in deep anguish. The pressure of the world and the pressure that he's about to face is crushing him pretty heavy. And this is the one thing that, gosh, I can't even remember how long it's been, 10, 11 years that this was given to me, but it tells everything and fits in this particular story so well. And that's when Jesus went to the garden to pray. When Jesus went to the garden to pray, he took his disciples with him. He said, "Stay awake, be alert, please pray with me." Then he walked away to pray. He prayed, "Father, please take this cup from me. The burden's too much to bear. You can do it, Father, if you want to, but Father, your will be done." When he returned, the disciples were asleep. He said, "Could you not stay awake? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Stay awake and pray with me." He prayed, "Father, please take this cup from me. The burden's too much to bear. You can do it, Father, if you want to, but Father, your will be done." When he came back, they were asleep again. It was so hard to comprehend. He left them there, fast asleep, and went to pray to the Father. He returned again and woke them up. The time for me has come to fulfill the Father's will, my friends, my brothers, how I love thee. The mob came and took him to trial. They found him oh so guilty. They beat and crucified Jesus Christ, but in the end it was his victory. He prayed, "Father, please take this cup from me. The burden's too much to bear. You can do it, Father, if you want to, but Father, your will be done. But Father, your will be done." That is in tune with what we've been covering through the compilation of all the Gospels. You can find these sayings, put them together throughout the four. Luke 24, verses 47 through 53. While he was speaking, behold, a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was preceding them. And he approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When those who were around him saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut his ear, and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, "Stop, no more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come against him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as you would against a robber? While I was with you daily in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this hour and the power of darkness are yours." The number of those that were sent to arrest Jesus shows that the religious leaders clearly regarded him as a dangerous man. They considered him so bad that he might call and there might be thousands of people rush to his aid and overpower those armed men. And they were not taking any chance of risk or failure in their attempt to capture and kill him. Judas warmly greeted Jesus with that kiss, and everybody knew this is him, even though they had seen him in the temple and all through the week. They know who he is. But it just goes to show you there was really nothing special with how Jesus looked. He looked like just everybody else. And so to make sure that he was not mistaken and someone else was killed, Judas went ahead and identified him. Jesus understood. He knew it was coming. And we're told that when the mob went up on him to capture him, in one of the Gospels it says, "Are you this Jesus?" And he said, "I am." Now we know that "I am" is God's name. And when he spoke it, they all fell down and fainted. And Jesus could have run away at that point in time. But he didn't. Jesus did not run away like a criminal to be captured. He did not run away for anything. He did not look at Judas. He did not answer falsely. He answered just who he was. And they asked, "Shall we take the sword to defend you?" "No, I don't need your defense." They had one sword. One. "Shall we take the sword and defend?" And before Jesus could answer, Peter cut off the ear of the man. And Jesus said, "Stop! Enough of this." And he healed the man. The last healing before he's going to trial and to be killed. Look at that highlighted sentence. The hour, hora, means a definite time, a point of time, a moment. Power, exousia, meaning the leading and more powerful among the created beings, superior to man, spiritual potentius. And darkness, skotos, meaning of ignorance, respecting divine things and human duties, and the accompanying ungodliness and immorality, together with their consequent misery in hell. Jesus is basically telling them here that they have no power over him except that which he allows. At this point in time or moment, the spiritual prince of ignorance, respecting divine things and human duties, and the accompanying ungodliness and immorality, together with their consequent misery in hell, are yours. This is his time. Can you imagine the looks on their faces? They understood what he was saying. You have no respect for anything that is godly. Right now your souls are so torn that you're listening to the deceiver. And therefore you are allowed to do what you want to do. This is your time. And I think he was speaking more to Satan there than he was to the men. John 18, verses 12 through 14. So the Roman cohort and the commander and the officers of the Jews arrested and bound him and led him to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of the people. Jesus will basically face two trials by the Sanhedrin. This one in front of Annas, and the one later before Caiaphas when it's a little closer to daylight. Before Jesus came home to the home of Caiaphas, the official high priest, he was led to the home of Annas, who was the ex-high priest, and was the power behind the throne of the high priest. Luke did not record the details of this particular trial. He picks it up later on. While this pre-dawn trial is taking place, Peter does exactly what Jesus predicted. 3 times he has said, hey, aren't you the guy that was with this Jesus character? Nope, wasn't me. I don't even know him. Hey, I know that you were with him. I've seen you. Nope, 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 wasn't me, it was somebody else. And the 3rd time that he makes this statement, he looks over and there's Jesus. And he's looking at him. And Peter, in great shame, runs away. He knows. He messed up. Luke will begin its official daylight meeting of the council in Luke 22, verse 66, which we'll get to in a little bit. Annas questioned Jesus, demanding to know if he was the Son of God. And Jesus answered, he had spoken openly to everyone in the synagogues and in the temple. Luke 22, verses 63 through 65. Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him and beating him. And they blindfolded him and were asking him, saying, prophesy, who is the one who hit you? And they were saying many other things against him, blaspheming. As stated, Luke did not record the proceedings of this first nighttime trial of Jesus. But he did record what took place afterwards, which was this punishment, this great atrocity was done. They blindfolded Jesus, and then he endured these slaps and endured these punches, and he may have even suffered a concussion at that point in time. Matthew and Mark also say that they spat in his face. Boy, I hate it when that happens. To me, that's nothing more of a great insult than to have somebody spit on you. It's very degrading. Now, it's quite simple to think that, well, maybe these guys just didn't know who Jesus really was. Well, I kind of think about that and go, I don't think so. I think they knew exactly who Jesus was. They knew he was the Son of God. They refused to believe in him. But there's more to it than that. When you think about it, what does it say? Man is literally deep down an enemy to God. That's what we're kind of told in Romans 5:10 and Colossians 1:21. Romans 5:10 says, for if, while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And Colossians 1:21 said, and although you were formerly alienated and hostile in mind, engaged in evil deeds. Deep down, when Adam did what he did, we are enemies to God until we're saved. For a long time, man waited literally to hit, slap, and spit in God's face. If Jesus were to draw on his rightful resources and divine power and authority, he could say exactly who struck him, and he could tell the man his entire life story. He could do that if he wanted. Yet in all this, Jesus refused to draw on those resources, and instead faced this as a spirit-strengthened man. Luke 22, verse 66. When it was day, the council of elders of the people assembled, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chambers, saying, why did Jesus have to face the Sanhedrin twice now? Once in an illegal trial because it was at night, and now again for this daytime one with the Sanhedrin again. According to the Sanhedrin's own laws, trials can only take place at daylight, in the daytime, when the sun's up. So what they did before was illegal. And if they were afraid of the people before this, there was no way they were going to parade him off and say we found him guilty, because you know the people would have rioted then. This second trial was necessary because that first trial had no legal standing. According to the Jewish law, only decisions made in the official meeting meeting place were valid. So in order to say he was guilty, they had to meet at daytime with the whole council, with Caiaphas in place and present. The first trial was held in the home of Annas, the former high priest, and then the home of Caiaphas, the high priest. So they had to call this one together for all the people to be there. It's also according to Jewish law that only an acquittal could be issued on the day of the trial. Guilty verdicts had to wait one night to allow for feelings of mercy to arise. According to Jewish law, all evidence had to be guaranteed by two witnesses who were separately examined and could not have contact with each other. According to Jewish law, false witnesses was punishable by death. Nothing is done to the many false witnesses in Jesus' trial. And finally, according to Jewish law, a trial always began by bringing forth evidence for the innocence of the accused, not just the opposite what they did. The same questions were asked now at this trial as they were the night before. Are you the Son of God? Tell us. And Jesus gave them the same answer. Why wouldn't he? Luke 23, verses 1 through 4. Then the whole body of them got up and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ a king. So Pilate asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, it is as you say. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. The Roman government did not allow the Jewish leaders the authority to execute a criminal. The religious leaders sent Jesus to Pontius Pilate because the Roman governor, had charge of all of that region. The Jewish leaders had reason to expect that Pilate would put him to death. After all, history tells us he was a cruel and vicious man. And yet here he is. He's got Jesus standing before him, and Jesus is bloodied, bruised, beat up. I'm not sure if he was standing tall or if he was kind of hunched over from being tired. But Pilate is looking at him and thinking, this is the king of the Jews? Are you kidding me? I find no guilt in him. Jesus gave no majestic defense for himself. He performed no instant miracles, and it just goes to show that even though Pilate was a cruel, vicious man, he wasn't stupid. When he found out that, well, gosh, you mean he's been teaching from the Galilee to Jerusalem? Oh no, let's send him to Herod. Herod's in charge of Galilee. So they took him away. Luke 23, verses 8 and 9 and 11. Now Herod was very glad when he saw Jesus, for he had wanted to see him for a long time because he had been hearing about him and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. And he questioned him at length, but he answered him nothing. And Herod with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, they dressed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Herod had surely heard a whole bunch about Jesus, just like he did with John the Baptist. Man, this guy's really cool. He does these great miracles. He tells these really neat stories, and he heals people. He just wanted to be entertained. He wanted to see Jesus do his thing. And he wanted it done on his terms, not Jesus's. Well, maybe if Jesus would just do something for me and make me laugh or what have you, I can pardon him and there won't be nothing anybody can do. But we know that's not what took place. He didn't give him a miracle. He didn't even answer because he knew what kind of scoundrel Herod really was. He knew he's not worth the time and trouble to even speak to defend himself. Even when others accused him with such venom, he refused to answer. So what did Herod do? You won't talk to me? Ha! I'll entertain myself. And he had him beat up more and mocked more. And then he sent him back to Pilate. Luke 23, verses 13 through 17. Pilate summoned the chief priests and rulers and the people and said to them, you brought this man to me as one who incites the people to rebellion. And behold, having examined him before you, I have found no guilt in this man regarding the charges which you make against him. No, nor has Herod, for he sent him back to us. And behold, nothing deserving death has been done by him. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. Now he was obliged to release to them at the feast one prisoner. You see, Pilate had this vision in his brain that this guy's done nothing wrong. And I got a way to be able to pardon him in a way. He's the one I'll release. But instead, he tells the people, who do you want released? This innocent man or this guy? And they all called for Barabbas, the criminal. Pilate didn't understand this because he figured anybody that these priests and stuff were saying, this guy is so anti-Rome and everything else, the people would love him. But the chief priests and people had all the people riled up to say, no, we want Barabbas. We don't want Jesus. We want him killed. Pilate had him beat, had him scourged. And that scourging is so brutal that it would literally open up a person, and it would literally show bones and internal organs, and most of the time a person would die before they could even be crucified. There was a long time ago, almost 15, 20 years ago, we made a couple of scourges out of the bone, out of the glass. We used lead weights. We made a couple of them. And we took watermelons and we put them on in the X stands, and then we scourged the watermelons, and it pulled chunks out, and they were flying, and pretty soon, if you kept it up, the guts fell out of it. Nobody wanted to beat the watermelon. Nobody wanted to. Because it was so brutal, and it really brought to mind what Jesus did for us. Pilate wanted to release him. The Jewish leaders don't want Jesus to go free, and the crowd will sympathize with him if he does. Instead, the chief priests and the elders influenced the crowd to release Barabbas, and they ended up crucifying Jesus. This was a strange, almost insane scene. A cruel, ruthless Roman governor trying to win the life of a miracle-working priest. I can't even imagine that. And people looking at him like he's nuts. Because of this, Pilate did not find the courage to oppose both the religious leaders and the crowd. John 19, 17 through 18. They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. They crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. I could go into a lengthy discussion about how horrible this crucifixion is, but that's not what I really want to focus on. I want to focus on something that's a little different point of focus. It's nowhere near talked about enough. Instead, let's look at a different perspective. Remember what John stated several times in Scripture? Jesus' message split humanity. You were either a believer and accepted Jesus, or you were not. You did not accept what he was teaching. The picture is clear here as well. This was literally true of the 3 crosses. The 2 people on either side and Jesus in the middle. This concept, there are many ways that it could be said that Jesus was the center. Jesus is still the center today. There's still who don't believe in him, and you still have the ones that do and accept him. Jesus was centered among humanity. Jesus never distanced himself from common men, and freely interacted with those though they to be great men. From his birth through his whole life, he lived as one of us. Jesus died among men and women, Jews and Gentiles, rich and poor, high class and no class, the educated, the uneducated, the religious and the secular, the guilty and the innocent, the weepers and the mockers, those deeply moved and those indifferent, those who hated him and those who loved him. Jesus was centered among sinful men. His enemies thought that this would make his sufferings way worse. Look, we're going to crucify him between 2 sinful men. They thought it would bother him, but it didn't. In his death, the righteously religious mocked him, and his disciples forsook him. And yet Jesus was centered among sinners to the end. Jesus was centered between believing and rejecting. Matthew 27:44 told us that both robbers mocked him, but in Luke 23, verses 39 through 41, one of the criminals who were hanged there, was hurling abuse at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other answered and rebuked him, said, "Do you not even fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed are suffering justly, for we are receiving what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." One of the criminals repented and accepted him. The last human voice testifying to Jesus was a criminal that converted right before he died. The disciples were gone, and all Jesus is healed and taught were nowhere to be found. The religious leaders mocked him and spit upon him, and even the faithful women were silenced by their grief. Yet there was one lone human voice, one lone, when all else was silent, that accepted what Jesus said and taught. Jesus was centered between the saved and the perishing. The thief on the cross was the last companion of Jesus on this earth before he died, and Jesus brought him to salvation, not by preaching a sermon, not by laying hands on him, but through his life. Do you not fear God? We deserve what we get, but this guy has done nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. He does not deserve what he's getting. Jesus on the cross took all the punishment our sin deserved. At the cross, Jesus was both the priest and the offering. Shortly before he died, he called out in Matthew 27:46. About the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus had known great pain and suffering, both physical and emotional, during his life. But yet he had never known separation from his Father. At this moment, he experienced what he had not yet ever experienced. And I'm pretty sure that Satan was doing the happy dance of joy. Ha! Even God's turning his back on him. I'm going to win. There was a significant sense in which Jesus rightly felt forsaken by the Father at this moment. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him." God the Father laid upon God the Son all the guilt, all the wrath of God for us. As horrible as the physical suffering of Jesus was, this spiritual suffering, the act of being judged for our sin in our place, what Jesus really dreaded about the cross, it was this cup, the cup of God's wrath, his righteous wrath, that he trembled at drinking. Remember, "Father, if you want, you can take this cup from me, but I will do your will." On the cross, Jesus became, as it were, an enemy of God, who was judged and forced to drink the cup of the Father's fury. And he did so that we would not have to drink that cup. Matthew 27:50, "And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit." 3 of the 4 Gospels say he cried out, "It is finished." John 19:38-41. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate granted permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100-pound weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. He's dead. He's buried. Again, from his birth through his whole life, he lived as one of us. Jesus died among men and women, Jews and Gentiles, rich and poor, high class and no class, the educated and the uneducated, the religious and the secular, the guilty and the innocent, the weepers and the mockers, those deeply moved and those indifferent, those who hated him and those who loved him. What side of the stand are we on? Let's go to prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you.